Were the 1980s cool?
Music-wise, very much so.
Fashion-wise?
Yeah, I was gonna say there was some things about the '80s I wish to forget, but music-wise, heck yeah.
It's funny, though, because for a while there, at least in the 90s, it felt like the 80s was very uncool, both musically and culturally. But yet it's stood the test of time, and I guess, has it made a comeback? Maybe it has.
I mean, I don't know if I would say that because it never. I mean, I guess to certain people like myself, it never really went away. I mean, I listen to '80s music probably more than current music, to be honest. If you get in my truck, you are probably going to hear either Pearl Jam, hair metal, or the '80s playing. That's probably what I have on, and I usually have Sirius XM '80s on 8 most of the time.
80s is as
So
much known for its megastar pop hits. When you think about, like, okay, we're
well,
getting into our sort of top five 80s albums, but that's not what we're calling it. We're calling it our top five albums released in the 1980s. And the main reason we're doing that is because we're incorporating as many of the genres as we want to.
right,
It's
yeah,
not just the pop music. We're not talking Michael Jackson here. Sorry, Michael, but you're not in
yeah.
here. Neither
No,
is Madonna.
Thriller's not on my list. Sorry,
Yeah,
spoiler alert.
Madonna's not on here either, spoilers,
Right,
etc. This
right.
isn't the let's go on a nostalgia trip back to the top pop of the 80s. This is not what's the
Right.
most commercially successful. This is what do we like the best? What do we think are some of the best albums, musical statements that were released in the 1980s?
I mean, I do have some pop on mine, but then
Me
I
too.
have some
Yeah.
other stuff. So, and that was what was great about the '80s. Like the earlier '80s stuff, you were getting that weird mix of you had like still like the new wave was there. You had a little bit of disco that was kind of ending though. You had a lot of like country crossover in the early '80s. And then about the mid '80s, it started to get more poppy. And then
It was
the
the
end of
era
the
of
'80s,
synthesizers, even more so
yeah,
than the
yep.
70s. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then like the end of the '80s was like you could tell times were changing because it's like hard rock started coming in and it was like more rock and like that. So that's what is interesting to me about the '80s is just the mix of music that you got. All right. I am gonna start 1982, so pretty much the beginning of the '80s. There was a little band you might have heard of called Toto.
All I wanna do when I wake up in the morning is see you light. Rosanna, Rosanna. Never thought that a girl like you could ever care for me. Rosanna. All I wanna do in the middle of the evening is hold you tight. Rosanna, Rosanna. I didn't know you were looking for more than I could ever be. Not quite a year since she went away. Rosanna, yeah. Now she's gone, and I have to say. Meet you all the way.
This had the big hit Africa on it. Was of course that was the big hit on this one. But speaking of pop, this is all straight up just straight pop. This was indicative of from '82. This was what you were getting, and this is a reissue of it. It's just on standard black, nothing spectacular about it. It's a reissue. You can find original of these for not too bad a price.
Not in
I've seen
that
them
nice
anywhere.
condition generally, though. I was just going to
Yeah,
comment
well,
on
yeah,
the really nice looking jacket there.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's because that's a repress. So yeah,
yeah,
but
exactly
yeah,
right.
I've seen it like 10 to 20 for an OG. So you can get it, but yeah, Toto.
My number five is a bit of an off-kilter pick, and that is the debut album from They Might Be Giants. This is
Oh, nice.
1986 on this one, and I like it because I just think it's such it's an explosion of creativity, quirky lyrics, awesome music, and it's just like nothing else in my collection. And I think it's not representative of the 80s, but it was released in 86 and is just such an unusually creative and weird set of songs.
All the people are so happy now, their heads are caving in. I'm glad they are a snowman with protective rubber skin, but every little thing's a domino that falls on different dots and crashes into everything that tries to make it stop. And the mirror, it reflects a tiny dancing skeleton surrounded by a fleshy overcoat and swaddling a furry hat, elastic mask, a pair of shiny marble dice. Some people call them snake eyes, but to me they look like mice, and nothing smelling like a rose. But I don't care if no one's coming up for air, 'cause I know nothing's gonna change my clothes ever anymore.
Every time They Might Be Giants ends up in a shootout in these top 5 videos, they end up winning, because every time I actually start listening to their albums again, I'm just like, well, this is just creatively genius.
Yeah, and they're a hard band to like pigeonhole into a genre too, because they're kind of poppy, but yet they're not poppy. They have some other. So yeah, my number 4, I am sticking in the pop genre. We're going 86 on this one. It's the Bangles, and it is A Different Light. This actually is an original, which is I found it in amazing condition, actually. I was surprised at how good a condition this was for being an original. If you lived through the 80s, lived through the genre, there was the big war going on. Were you a Go-Go's fan or were you a Bangles fan? And I don't know why it ended up that way, but it's like you can only like one of these bands. You can't like both of them.
I guess I'm a Bengals
I was
fan.
I was always a Bengals too. I always liked the Bengals better. But that was just I do remember that though. It was because like there was just even some of my friends were like, I can't believe you like the Bengals. The Go-Go's are so much better. And I'm like, why can't you like both of them? I mean, I had the Go-Go's on my list for a little while, and then I went through and I listened to all the stuff, and I'm like, no, this Bengals album is just better overall.
My number 4 comes from a very, very different place than the Bangles, and that is because it is Ministry, the land of rape and honey, which was actually taken from a town's sign. They meant rape as in rapeseed, because the town was known for its rapeseed farming. But nonetheless, how Al Jorgensen and crew meant it was potentially very different. There was industrial music for quite some time before this album came out. Industrial music really has its roots. I don't even know how far back you want to go. Maybe the 70s, maybe even earlier than that. If you want to count Harry Partch and things, perhaps even earlier than that. But at the very least, there really hadn't been a lot of pop crossover with heavy industrial music until Ministry's album came out. And this was a seminal album that was heavily influential by a band called Nine Inch Nails, who released A Pretty Hate Machine about a year after this one came out. This is 1988, and is just an incredible album. it was such a blast when it came out. It was such a statement, and it was so raw and tough and in your face and unapologetic and all sorts of other things. It really kind of changed a whole bunch of music.
Stronger than reason, stronger than lies. The only truth I know is the look in your
I am kicking myself right now because I had forgotten Pretty Hate Machine was 80s. I thought it was 90 when it came out.
Oh, is that
It
true?
should have been on my list.
Maybe you are correct. I don't actually know if that's true. Maybe I should check that.
Check. I think you're right now that I'm thinking. I think
Okay.
it was like maybe 88 or 89 when it came out.
Yeah, 89.
Okay.
And the reason is my understanding is that Trent Reznor said that it was this album that inspired them.
It was. Yep. He has
Yep.
in several interviews. He had said that. So. So now I'm kicking myself because that should have been number one on my list, but here we are.
Well, we can. If you've got it on vinyl, we can make it your number one. We're not done yet.
I mean,
so, do you need a few minutes to reorder your list? Yeah.
We might want to do that. No, I'll. That's fine.
Let me just mention that this is the 2021 really nice remastered, reissued edition. It's a 2-disc set. The original release of this album was a very long album. It was released on 1 disc back in the day, and as such, it was squished and didn't sound all that great.
Right,
This is
yeah.
a 3-sided album with a 4-side of bonus tracks, which are okay. They're fine. It's got Stigmata as a remix, and Tonight We Murder, which is pretty good as well. But it's a really great sounding pressing as well. So if you're looking for this album, this most recent, I think it's 2021 or 2022
Somewhere
issue,
around
you
there,
can
yeah.
still find it in local records
Yeah.
stores and such.
And they did a good job. They released a bunch of those early albums. They did those reissue those, and those are very, very
Yep.
good.
Standard black.
Yeah. My number 3, still kind of poppy, but yet this is going to start going into the rock a little bit. This is the 84-ish release of the Pretenders Learning to Crawl. This album came out after it was a very tumultuous time for the band. They had lost 2 of the original band members. They both died. I do believe they were both from ODs, unfortunately. So Chrissy Hind was really kind of going through it, and she's like,
Ouch. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to continue, because they were like the founding members, and she's like, do I really want to continue this band? And then she had just had a baby, and the baby was learning to crawl, and that's where the album title came from. And it kind of also represented them moving on. It's like, okay, we're going to start kind of over as a band.
I went back to Ohio, but my city was gone. There was no train station, there was no downtown. South Tower had disappeared. All my favorite places, my city had been pulled down, reduced to parking spaces. Hey, oh, where to go, Ohio?
big hits off of here, Middle of the Road and Back on the Chain Gang were the big hits. And I have always been a Pretenders fan, and I do believe this is my favorite Pretenders album, hands down. Chrissie Hynde is an amazing songwriter, and the musicianship on this album is just great as well too.
I am going to have to check that
and-
one out. I guess I know those songs, but I can't
Yeah.
say that I've really given
it's-
that album a consideration. I will have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's standard black, and this is an original as well. I got this like super cheap. I want to say I paid like $10 for this maybe or whatever, and it was in
Yeah.
really good condition. So there's my number 3, The Pretenders.
My number 3 really goes to one of the weirdest albums of all time. If you ask the internet, and probably AI these days because of such, you're often going to hear that Trout Mask Replica is like the weirdest rock album that ever came out. I disagree. I think it's my number 3, which is Nina Hagen's Nunsex Monk Rock. This is absolutely one of my all-time favorite albums because of how daring and kind of punk, new wave, hard rock, jazz, everything. It sounds like nothing. It sounds like everything. It's got the weirdest lyrics you've ever heard in your life.
I have
And
no idea what this even is.
Nina Hagen is just such an amazing singer with a huge variety of vocal styles and ranges to it. And it's as weird as Trout Mask Replica, except it's way cooler to listen to, would be my assessment of it.
Once upon a time, when Jesus was walking down his way on earth, he met this man.
Who was possessed by a demon.
And Jesus asked the man, "Why do you speak so funny? And why do you behave like that?" And the man said,
Well, Jesus, because I'm possessed by a demon. God! Jesus said.
and the demon went out into the pig, and the pig was running away, screaming. And the man was free. Do you see? If you only could believe, Jesus said. Everything is possible for those who believe.
The real Bukowski is our neighbor. His face is gray. His brows are paper, but like balloons of blue or red, bright anti-worlds float over his
I am going to have to check that out because I can honestly say I have no idea what that is.
I
Have
became
never
a
heard of that.
Nina Hagen fan just over the past 5 years or so when I accidentally stumbled on this album, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I fell in love, and so I've since picked up
Okay.
a whole bunch of her catalog, and she now is a big part of my collection. But actually, a couple other things about this. This is 1982, by the way. This was right
Okay.
after Nina Hagen sort of went solo after being in the Nina Hagen band. Basically, this is her without the band, making a solo album. She credits, despite this being 1982, she thanks the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the back of it.
Really?
Yep, because apparently they were kids or something and staying at her place at one point or something like that.
Okay.
But she also had just had a child as of the recording of the album, this being the baby. Originally, she wanted to record the album while pregnant. She deliberately wanted to do it because she felt that having that life inside her would add to the creative output. But
Okay, yeah.
the producers in that were like, no, you're 9 months pregnant. Just have a baby. We'll record the album later.
Right.
And so they did. But as a result, it really is influenced by her motherhood and by the world around her. And it's just a monster of an artistic statement. And one of the most interesting albums in my collection.
Going completely opposite of that for my number 2.
It's pretty easy to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the you don't have to go far to be the opposite of that. So
That is true.
yeah,
I'm going 87. So earlier, how I said the Rock's kind of taken over. This one is a little poppy, little rocky though. Arguably, this in my number 1, which we now know should have been Pretty Hate Machine, but I'm a dummy and thought it was 90. probably two of the biggest albums of the 80s, bar none. Of course, I'm talking about Def Leppard's Hysteria. This was everywhere. Like when this came out, it was just like, okay, it's
Yeah.
Is this now? Pour Some Sugar on Me. What else was on there?
Rocket,
Hysteria,
Women,
of course,
Hysteria.
Rocket,
Yeah.
Women,
I mean, the almost
Armageddon it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that had. It was one of the albums with, I recall at the time, one of the most number of hits on it.
Yeah.
Because it had, like, was it 7 or 8 individual kind of
I think
released
8, yeah.
singles that
Yeah.
topped the charts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're still rock, but yet they got pop influences in there. And this was kind of a total departure for them in a way, because their earlier albums were more like new wave, British heavy metal, that type of heavy metal sound. And Pyromania was huge. And they deliberately said, we don't want to go in and make a Pyromania 2, because every other band in the world is trying to do that because of the success we had with Pyromania. We want to do something completely different, but yet still be Def Leppard. And that was Hysteria. And, you know, like we said, 7 or 8 singles off of there that were all like giant hits.
Yeah.
So you can't really argue with, they kind of topped themselves with Pyromania on that one, I think. Pyromania is a great album, though,
especially when it first came out. It had such a slick, sort of almost syrupy, rich sound to it that you really just hadn't heard much else before. And that was producer Mutt Lange and a few others, right? So
I think it was just Mutt Lange. I'll have to look, but I think it was just Mutt Lange, I think. And well, and the band too. Yeah. But yeah, and I would credit a lot of that album to Mutt Lange, though, because then, like, if you know the history of that album, it's amazing that album even got made, because their drummer got in the car accident and he lost his arm. And then when that happened, they were just like, we're done as a band because we have no drummer, because how in the world is this dude going to drum with one arm? Well, he figured it out.
Yeah.
He created a drum kit where he does everything. I think it's his right arm that he lost. So he does everything that he would do with his right arm with his feet. And then he still has, so yeah. So it's like, there's a good, I think it was on VH1 maybe, of the making of that. If you ever can find that, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. Look that up, because it's amazing that album even got made with all that they went through.
My number 2 is one of my favorite bands of all time. This is basically my favorite album from one of my favorite bands, the band being In Excess, and the album being Shabooh Shoobah. A lot of people, when discussing top albums of the 1980s would probably assume I would have picked this one, In Excess Kick, which is, after
a good
all,
album,
just a
too.
giant 1980s album again, which had maybe half a dozen or so number one singles on it. But for
That was
my
on
money,
my short list, actually.
for my money, Shabu Shaba is the best In Excess album. This is the album where they found their sound, but still had their kind of raw rock and roll sensibility about them. And I just think this album has stood the test of time as one of the most incredible albums from the 1980s.
I'm standing here on the ground. The sky above won't fall down. Seeing no evil in all directions. Resolution of happiness. Things have been done for too long. Don't change for you. Don't change a thing for me. Don't change for you. Don't change a thing for me.
1982 on this one.
I didn't realize it was that early, actually.
Yep. And then they
That's
went on to do The
surprising.
Swing, which has a little bit of a poppier sound. Then Listen Like Thieves, which was a giant album from 1987, except for Hysteria and a couple others we might talk about here in a second. But it was a big album from that year. It was a year of big albums, and that was one of the biggest, Listen Like Thieves. And then they followed it up with Kick, which was one of the best-selling albums of the 1980s. So...
Yeah, like I said, Kick was on my short list. It was almost on it was on my list for a while.
It's like a 3 or
then-
4 album run where In Excess was just top of the world and releasing incredible
Right.
albums. A little bit spotty afterwards, and they were still finding their sound. It had a little bit more of a new wavy kind of thing for their debut album. Not great, but it's okay. So
Good pick, though. All right, my number one, I'm still sticking to 87. 87 was a big year for big albums. Hysteria was like huge, but arguably my number one, probably a little bigger than Hysteria. A little band called Guns N' Roses, and that's Appetite for Destruction.
I'll be loaded like a freight train, flying like an aeroplane, feeling like a space brain one more time tonight. I'm on the night train, follow the sun. I'm on the night train, fill my cup. I'm on the night train, ready to crash and burn. I never learn. I'm on the night train. I love that stuff. I'm on the night train. And I could never get enough. I'm on the night train. Never to return. No.
When this came out, I was just like, okay, the 80s are this is where music's going, because this is nothing like arguably you can say this was nothing like anything in the 80s when this hit. People didn't know what to make of this, actually.
it was hardcore. It felt real hardcore at the time
Oh,
of
yeah.
its release, in terms of just like being unabashedly in your face and raunchy, and just rough and violent and all sorts of stuff. It was an album that was just there to take names, and it took huge.
Yeah,
So,
of course, the big hit, Welcome to the Jungle, also had Night Train, Out to Get Me, Mr. Brownstone, Paradise City. That was another huge hit for them. My Michelle. So there was a lot of hits up of this too. But yeah, arguably, I think still, even though Pretty Hate Machine probably should have been my number one, this album, like I said, this came out and it was like, okay, music is changing, because this is just like, what is happening with music? Like, what is this?
in my opinion, Guns N' Roses never equaled it. I know people there are huge fans of Use Your Illusion, and that for my money,
they're good, but not.
They basically started and ended with
Yep.
Appetite for Destruction. There.
No,
so
I agree. They hit their peak where their first album, and then it was like, okay, you're making good albums now, but it's no Appetite.
my number one is also a giant album from the 1980s, and that is Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. This is the one that's got Shout on it. This is the one that's got Everybody Wants to Rule the World. This is the one that's got Head Over Heels, which is the track I'm going to pick.
I wanted to be with you alone and talk about the weather, but your distance I can trace against the child in your face. Won't escape my attention. You keep your distance with a system of touch and gentle persuasion. I'm lost in admiration, dude. I need you this much. Oh, you're wasting my time. You're just wasting time. Something happens and I'm head over heels. I never find out till I'm head over heels. Something happens and I'm head over heels. I don't take my heart, don't break my heart, don't throw it away.
What's funny about this album is when it first came out in a sea of pop. But over the years, it has really found its place as a prophetic and deeply resonant album that was made by Tears for Fears. There are quite a few people out there who have had their lives influenced very significantly by the messages in Tears for Fears, that of inclusion and openness, decrying sort of the state of the world and protest and all sorts of things that this album is about. And musically, it's really a deeply diverse and interesting and well-recorded album, which is why it makes my number one. As I was doing the shootout, I've always loved this album. I've always loved the sound of this album. And as I was doing this kind of, let's actually put our top five together, I just kept on hearing and saying, wow, this album.
Again, that was on my short list as well. That almost made my top five too.
Yeah.
It was on there just because, like you said, it's just so good. Like you listen to, and it still stands. Like it's a good album even now, because I listened to it front to back when I was trying to make my five, and I out loud said, "This album is so good. The production on it was so good. It was the songwriting was So that's a really good pick. Good pick for that number one."
Before we wrap things up, there's two albums I wanted to bring up as kind of, why didn't we talk about these? I can't help but mention The Cure Disintegration, which is easily my actual favorite number one album from the 1980s that I don't have on vinyl. I just have the original CD, but the thing is that's the way to listen to The Cure's Disintegration, is on the original 1980, whatever year it was, 88-ish.
Say 87, 88, something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, the original CD is really the best sounding version of that album that has been released. Better than the remaster. The problem with the album is it's always been too long for vinyl. The original release cut out a song. Ever since 2010, it's been on a remastered 2-disc version, so they solved that problem, thankfully. But you're still flipping the disc over 3 times in a way that the Cure's Disintegration just really isn't meant to be heard. And because it is still a very long album, it tends to have a low volume. They tend, that's part of how they fit as much of the album, even on 2 discs as they can, is it tends to be, it was mastered, remastered a little bit on the lower side. So the CD is still the way to go with that one. And thus, despite it easily being my number 1 1980s album, it's not even on my top 5 vinyl list. Finally, I wanted to bring up Nirvana Bleach. Technically, Nirvana Bleach came out in June of 1989. So if you're going to include it as an album released in the 1980s, then it almost certainly has to be in my top 5, and I own it on vinyl.
Right.
But I didn't include it because most of us, including myself, did not hear it in the 1980s. And that is because that initial June release was very limited by Sub Pop, which was very small at the time. And a lot of us heard it by the time it got its actual wide vinyl release of 1992. By that point, though, a lot of us had heard it because of dubbed cassettes. You know, dub cassettes, they, especially in the punk and hardcore and all those other scenes, was prevalent. And that is how so much music was distributed back then, is through like kind of old, hey, this is like the 4th generation dub of this Nirvana Bleach, but it finally here, you can listen to it, and there you go. But that's the realistic, in my opinion, the realistic nature of Nirvana Bleach is it's a 90s album, even though it was technically released in June of 1989.
And yeah, and that's how I heard it the first time, was on probably a 4th or 5th generation copy that sounded horrible at that point. But yeah, and the reason why I didn't include it is because I've talked about it several other times. So I'm like, I didn't want to bring it up. Like, arguably, yes, it should be on this list too. But it's just like, I've talked about it probably 3 other times on the show, and I think I've even showed it for one. I don't remember what list it was, but yeah.